A few hundred years ago, if someone died with a dirty soul, the family had one very normal solution. They hired a poor guy to eat bread off the corpse. Not metaphorically. Actual bread. Actual corpse. Terrific workplace culture. The bread was supposed to absorb the dead person's sins, and then the man ate it like cursed funeral toast. He took a few coins, swallowed everyone's spiritual leftovers, and somehow became the village's walking moral trash bag. The same people who needed him immediately treated him like he had contaminated the curtains with invisible spiritual garbage. And somehow, that was a real job. A paid position with horrible benefits, questionable snacks, and a spiritually radioactive reputation. But here's the uncomfortable part. That is not even the strangest job in this video. History was just stretching. Before electricity, modern medicine, labor laws, and rich people discovering hobbies, society solved problems by throwing humans at them. Need to send an urgent command across an empire? Make a guy run until his lungs file a formal complaint. Today, communication is so easy we barely respect it. You can send a text across the planet instantly. You can regret sending it, email someone, ignore their reply, and still pretend you are extremely busy. But for most of human history, information had legs. Sometimes hooves, sometimes sandals, sometimes one deeply exhausted government employee. Before the telegraph arrived in 1837, long-distance messages did not move magically. They moved physically, painfully, and usually dirty. If a king wanted to send an order, that order had to travel through dust, rain, bandits, and miserable roads. Not normal bad roads, ancient roads. Basically dirt with ambition and a strong desire to ruin everyone's ankles. And if the message was late, misunderstood, intercepted, or lost, bad things could happen very quickly. Not oops, your package is delayed bad, more like the army never got the order bad. So ancient empires had one simple problem. How do you make information move faster than one tired person? The Persians had one of the best answers, a massive courier system called the angurium. Very official, very sweaty. This was not just some guy on a horse yelling, "Important letter coming through." It was an imperial nervous system. The main artery was the Royal Road, stretching about 1,700 miles across the empire's western half. It connected major cities like Susa and Sardis, which is not a commute. That is a geopolitical side quest. Along the road were relay stations, security posts, guards, checkpoints, and fresh horses waiting for the next rider. One messenger rode as fast as possible, handed off the message, and the next rider kept going immediately. Again and again. Horse after horse. Rider after rider. A royal message moved like an ancient loading bar, and it worked shockingly well. A trip taking about 90 days on foot could shrink to 7 or 9 days. By ancient standards, that was basically fiber optic internet with hooves. Ridiculous image, extremely useful system. That speed mattered because these messengers were not carrying birthday invitations. Nobody sprinted across Persia for cake logistics. They carried royal commands, military orders, tax instructions, and political decisions. Basically, the paperwork holding an empire together. That information kept a giant empire from becoming a very expensive pile of confused provinces, arguing in different directions. So if someone severed that communication line, they were not just stopping a letter, they were blinding the king. And when a king is blind, everyone underneath him starts making very nervous eye contact. Historically, that is never relaxing. But Persia had horses. Helpful, elegant, occasionally judgmental. What if your empire did not have horses? Well, then you get the Inca running messages across the Andes like the mountains personally owed them pain. Their roads were steep, the air was thin, and every path looked designed specifically to punish human knees. So the Inca used highly trained runners called Chaskis, slim, fast, disciplined, and probably terrifyingly powerful below the waist. But here's where it gets stranger. The Inca did not have a formal written language like we usually imagine writing. They did have quipu, complex knotted strings used to record information, especially numbers. Ancient spreadsheets, but stringier. Still, many messages were carried orally, which meant the Chaski was not just a delivery guy. He was the envelope. He was the hard drive. He was the notification sound trapped in one athletic body. A message would be spoken to him. He had to memorize it, keep it accurate, and then immediately run. Across narrow roads, brutal slopes, and mountain air sitting thousands of feet above sea level. Casual Tuesday, apparently. Basically, the terrain your parents claim they walked through to school, uphill both ways, in sandals, during a blizzard. The Inca also used relay stations, small huts along the road where another Chaski waited for the message handoff. The first runner arrived, repeated the message, and the next runner memorized it and kept going. Simple, brilliant, terrifying. Because if the message changed slightly at every handoff, suddenly the king's order could mutate into absolute nonsense. It could go from "send more troops to the northern border" to something nobody politically survives explaining later. Like, "tell Greg he smells weird and move the llamas," which is not a military strategy, usually, and nobody wants to be the guy who accidentally starts a llama-based military crisis. Imagine writing that report. But that was the risk. When communication depends on human memory, every message becomes a tiny hostage situation. The Chaskis had to be fast, accurate, disciplined, and calm while carrying information that could affect entire provinces. And honestly, that is what makes these old messenger jobs so fascinating. At first, they sound ordinary. A guy delivers a message, big deal. But remove modern technology and suddenly he is not just a worker. He is infrastructure. A cable made of muscle. Wi-Fi with anxiety. Holding a political system together. And that is the pattern we keep seeing. History had problems it could not solve with machines yet. So it solved them with bodies. Very innovative. Deeply horrifying. Excellent reminder that technology is often just fewer exhausted people. A messenger carried the speed of an empire. A runner carried the memory of a king across mountains. And soon, someone else would be asked to carry something much heavier. Not a letter, not an order, not a memorized message, a soul. Because apparently history looked at guilt and said, make that someone's job. Delivering a king's command is stressful, sure, but at least the message usually fits in a bag. The next job involved carrying something much harder to pack, guilt. Specifically, dead people's guilt. In parts of England, Scotland, and Wales from around the 1600s into the 1800s, there was the Sin Eater. And yes, the name is doing exactly as much emotional damage as you think it is. A Sin Eater was usually poor, often isolated, and conveniently located at the edge of society's compassion. Apparently, history loved outsourcing spiritual emergencies to whoever had the least bargaining power. Efficient, horrible, very on-brand. Here is how it worked. Someone dies. The family grieves. The room goes quiet. The body waits on the bed. Candles flicker, relatives whisper, and everyone tries not to think about how death rituals had absolutely no chill. Then someone says, "Should we call the Sin Eater?" Which is an insane sentence under any lighting conditions. That sounds like a haunted village speaking right before the fog starts moving sideways. But for some communities, it was serious. The fear was simple. What if the dead person had unconfessed sins and their soul was not clean? What if they could not move safely into the afterlife? Prayer helped, sure, but some people wanted something more visible. So the family summoned the one person nobody wanted near them, until they desperately needed him. The Sin Eater arrives. He steps into the room. No applause. No warm welcome. Just terrible, useful silence. That special silence people make when they need you, but still think they are better than you. Then the family brings food, usually bread, often beer, because apparently eternal dread needed catering. The bread would be placed on or near the body, sometimes on the chest or face of the dead person. Symbolically, it absorbed the sins as the soul floated toward whatever customer service desk the afterlife was running. Then the Sin Eater would eat it, sitting beside a corpse. Because history never heard of workplace boundaries. Not because he was hungry, not because this was a fun village snack, because everyone hoped the sins had moved. And once he swallowed the food, the sins transferred into him. Great system. Very normal. Extremely cursed. To complete the cursed pub lunch, he might wash it down with beer. Warm beer. Probably stale. Historically suspicious. From the family's perspective, this ritual had emotional logic. They were terrified, grieving, and desperate for proof. They loved the person who died, or at least wanted to believe that person was going somewhere better. The Sin Eater gave grief what it desperately wants: visible evidence that something had been done. The guilt had been moved. The soul had been helped. The family could breathe again for about 5 minutes. Then the mood changed. He was no longer the man who saved Grandpa's soul. He was the man carrying Grandpa's sins. And maybe Grandma's. And probably several local scandals nobody wanted documented. The same people who needed him now looked at him like he was spiritually radioactive and bad for the curtains. They paid him a few coins, maybe some food, then pushed him back toward the margins of society. Thank you for absorbing our moral filth. Now please leave before you contaminate the furniture. This is the part that makes sin eating more than just weird. It is sad, because the contradiction is brutal. The community needed someone to take away guilt, but once he took it, they punished him for having it. He was necessary and unwanted, useful and despised, invited only when death arrived, then rejected immediately afterward. And humans are very good at that. We create a role for someone, then act disgusted when they do it. We ask them to touch the thing we fear, then recoil when they return with it on their hands. Wait, you know what's weird? The Sin Eater was basically a spiritual scapegoat with much worse catering. Some historians connect it to older scapegoat traditions, where a community's sins were symbolically placed onto an animal. Often a goat carried the guilt away into the wilderness, and the village got to feel clean again. The goat, unfortunately, did not receive a glowing review. History was not big on customer satisfaction. Sin eating worked in the same emotional direction. Except instead of a goat, it was a poor man. Instead of wilderness, it was social exile. And instead of symbolic transfer, there was bread. So much cursed bread. But the strangest thing is that sin eating was not always just creepy superstition. Sometimes it looked almost like sacrifice. The last known sin eater in England is often said to have been Richard Munslow, a farmer from Shropshire. And his story hits differently, because he was reportedly respected locally. Not a cartoon ghoul waiting for funeral snacks. He was a farmer, a father, and according to accounts, may have taken the role after losing his children. That changes the whole feeling. Suddenly, the job is not just ridiculous. It is grief-shaped into a ritual. A man who had lost too much helped other families believe their dead were not lost forever. From outside, eating bread near a corpse sounds like history got drunk and invented a side quest. But underneath the weirdness was something painfully human. People feared their loved ones were not safe after death. They wanted certainty. They wanted forgiveness to be visible, because invisible mercy is emotionally terrible paperwork. They wanted someone to physically carry away the thing they could not see. And the Sin Eater became that someone. For a few coins, a piece of bread, a cup of beer, and a lifetime of being treated like a soul trash bin. So yes, history had people paid to eat the sins of the dead. But the real horror was not the bread. It was not the beer. It was not even the corpse. Somehow, the corpse was not the worst part. The real horror was everyone agreeing one person should become unclean so everyone else could feel pure. And once you understand that, the next job feels darker because powder monkeys carried actual danger. Not moral danger for dead adults. Actual danger for children who were alive. And somehow the workplace had cannons. Now, if eating sin bread beside a corpse sounded rough, imagine being 12 on a wooden warship. The ship shakes. Cannons scream. Smoke fills the air, so thick the boat seems to cough itself to death. Splinters fly through the deck like wooden knives. Men shout orders. Someone bleeds, someone prays. Then an adult turns to a child and says, "Go get more gunpowder." Excellent leadership. Deeply cursed. Welcome to the life of a powder monkey, which somehow was not a dangerous serial mascot. During the Age of Sail, naval battles were giant wooden buildings throwing metal balls at each other. They kept doing that until one gave up, sank, or became accidental modern art. And if you wanted cannons to keep firing, you needed gunpowder. A lot of it. Unfortunately, explosive logistics. But gunpowder could not sit casually beside the cannon like a snack bowl of explosions. That would be bad. That would be, congratulations, your ship is now a cloud. Bad. So, gunpowder was kept down below. It stayed in the ship's magazine, safer from sparks and enemy fire. Safer, of course, is doing emotional labor there. The problem was simple. Cannons were up where fighting happened. Powder was down where it was stored, and someone had to run between them, again, and again, and again, during a naval battle. Grown sailors were busy loading cannons, aiming, firing, repairing damage, and trying not to become floor decoration. So navies looked around and found the perfect worker for the job. Small boys? History, please stop talking. They were quick, agile, and able to squeeze through cramped spaces. Very useful. Extremely depressing. And poor children had limited power to say, "Actually, sir, I prefer not to sprint through an explosion factory." So powder monkeys ran below, grabbed gunpowder cartridges, and rushed them back up to the gun crews. The faster he ran, the faster the cannon could fire. And the faster it fired, the better the ship's chances. So in the cold logic of war, these children mattered. They were not decorative. They were part of the machine. Tiny, terrified links in a chain of violence, which is a sentence that should make civilization sit quietly. To make it sound less monstrous, navies could point to benefits: food, clothing, a bed, sometimes education, a path into the Navy, a future. Which sounds generous until you notice where that future was located, directly behind incoming cannonballs. History loved calling desperation an opportunity and hoping nobody saw the smoke. For poor boys, orphans, and children with nowhere else to go, the Navy could look like survival. And in a way, it was survival. Just survival with shrapnel, splintered wood, fire, screaming, and seawater. The boys were not protected by being small. Cannon fire does not check birth certificates. It just explodes. Eventually, regulations started appearing. In the United States, after the War of 1812, rules restricted very young powder monkeys. The British later followed with their own age limits. Which sounds basic, but history needed time to discover childhood. Still, rules on paper and reality at sea have never been the same thing, especially when war gets hungry. The practice faded in the mid-1800s as technology changed and child labor laws began to tighten, which is good because less child explosives management is generally a sign civilization is moving forward. Some ridiculous jobs vanished because they were inefficient. Some vanished because they became unfashionable. This one vanished because society slowly admitted children should not be replaceable delivery systems for gunpowder. Bold discovery, very brave. Now, after corpse bread and cannon children, we need an emotional palate cleanser. Unfortunately, history's palate cleanser is urine, because medieval medicine had absolutely no chill. Today, if a doctor wants to examine your urine, they send it to a lab. Machines analyze it. Numbers appear. Nobody has to swirl it like wine and say, notes of kidney despair, which is medical progress. But in the Middle Ages, urine could become the star witness in your diagnosis. This practice was called uroscopy, and to be fair, looking at urine was not completely insane. Modern urine analysis is real. Doctors still use it to detect infections, diabetes, kidney issues, dehydration, and other problems. The difference is that modern medicine uses chemistry, microscopy, and actual measurable data. Medieval uroscopists had color, smell, vibes, and occasionally taste. Yes, taste. Humanity has suffered. Some practitioners looked at urine, sniffed it, and in certain cases tasted it. The patient probably reconsidered everything. That was exactly when the patient thought, "I should have just stayed sick." Honestly, understandable. The practice goes back thousands of years. Ancient physicians noticed urine changed color and consistency depending on illness. Egyptian medical texts, including the Ebers Papyrus, discussed urinary conditions. So yes, this weirdness had paperwork. By the Byzantine and medieval periods, uroscopy became more formalized. Because apparently pee needed a professional development arc. A physician might collect a fresh sample, hold it up to the light, and compare its color to reference charts. Clear urine might suggest one issue. Dark red, another. Green could point toward jaundice. Black meant start apologizing. But again, here is the twist. They were not always wrong. Annoying, but true. Sweet-tasting urine could indicate diabetes because excess sugar can appear in urine. Yes, the clue was real. Bad-smelling urine might suggest infection. Color and clarity could actually provide useful medical information. So the ridiculous part was not that they looked. The ridiculous part was that looking was sometimes their best tool. They were trying to build medicine out of human senses, eyes, noses, tongues, and terrifying amounts of confidence. A confidence level modern malpractice lawyers would describe as deeply exciting. And by exciting, I mean legally flammable. The problem was not always diagnosis. Sometimes they could identify that something was wrong. The problem was treatment. Suspicious urine did not magically create antibiotics, insulin, surgery, or functioning kidney science. So a uroscopist might say, your urine indicates a serious imbalance, then offer herbs, bleeding, or prayer, or something that looked invented by a tired man near a swamp. At that point, he was not saving you. He was just taking the piss, literally. History occasionally writes its own jokes and then refuses to apologize. Still, uroscopy is interesting because it sits between absurdity and progress. Ridiculous, but not completely pointless. A man holding pee like a golden soup competition looks insane, but underneath was a real attempt to understand the body. Not with machines, not with labs. Just whatever humans had available. Senses, charts, confidence, and questionable lighting. And that is the pattern again. No telegraph? Use messengers? No certainty about the soul? Use a sin eater. No automated cannon supply? Use children? No diagnostic lab? Use a man brave enough to sniff the evidence. But the strangest job was not in an empire, a funeral room, a warship, or a sickbed. It was in a garden, a beautiful garden, a peaceful garden, a garden owned by someone aggressively rich. Someone so bored, so allergic to normal hobbies, they decided the missing decoration was a human being. After all of that, you might think the strangest jobs came from desperation. War, disease, death, empire. You know, the usual human disaster buffet. But no. One of the weirdest jobs came from rich people being bored. In the 1700s, wealthy estate owners in England, Ireland, and Scotland had a problem. Not a real problem. Their houses were enormous. Their land was beautiful. Their parties had more candles than some villages had citizens. And somehow, life was still not dramatic enough. So they turned to landscape design, because therapy was not fashionable yet. This was the age of the English landscape garden, where nature was made to look natural by controlling every inch. Very normal. Nothing says untouched wilderness like paying workers to emotionally arrange rocks. You would have rolling lawns, ponds, winding paths, clusters of trees, fake ruins, artificial caves, maybe a tiny temple. The garden was supposed to feel wild, organic, untouched. Which is hilarious, because everything had been carefully designed. Apparently the hill needed the correct emotional tone, and the rocks had to express tasteful loneliness. But for some estate owners, even that was not enough. The trees were nice, the ponds were nice, the fake caves were nice. But something was missing. Not flowers, not fountains, not drainage. A guy. That was what the garden was missing. A guy. A living, breathing, preferably mysterious guy. And that is how we get the ornamental garden hermit. Yes, a human garden decoration. This was a real position. Some wealthy people hired men to live on their estates as hermits, usually in a cave, hut, or rustic structure. The hermit's job was to sit around looking profound. Maybe read. Maybe meditate. Maybe contemplate unpaid emotional landscaping. Guests could walk through the garden and suddenly encounter him like a rare woodland creature with rent obligations. Oh look, Margaret, a man contemplating existence beside the shrubbery. Normal aristocratic afternoon, apparently. Some versions were almost theatrical. The hermit might speak to guests, tell stories, or offer bits of wisdom. One famous example was Father Francis, associated with the Hill family in Shropshire, who reportedly interacted with visitors. So that version sounds less cursed, more like being paid to be a weird park ranger for aristocrats. Still strange, but survivable. Then there were the more intense versions because rich boredom eventually finds the basement. Take Joseph Pocklington, a wealthy man who inherited money young and apparently decided to spend it as loudly as possible. He bought an island, built dramatic structures, commissioned grottos, a fortress, and even a druid temple. Because why have normal lakeside property when you can make a fantasy map for emotionally unstable bankers? Then he advertised for a man to live as a hermit in his garden. Not visit, live there. The conditions were not exactly employee of the month friendly. The man was reportedly expected to stay for 7 years. He was not supposed to wash, not cut his hair, not cut his nails, not speak to guests, just exist, quietly, filthily, philosophically, for 7 years, which is a long time to become furniture. If he completed it, he would receive a substantial payment. Spread over 7 years, though, it becomes less magical. It becomes less life-changing fortune and more, congratulations, you monetized becoming local folklore. And wait, you know what's weird? This job reveals something different from the others. Messengers existed because empires needed speed. Sin eaters existed because families feared damnation. Powder monkeys existed because war was hungry and children were available. Uroscopists existed because medicine was struggling. But garden hermits existed because someone looked at luxury property and thought, this view needs a poor person. That is the whole joke, and also the whole horror. The hermit was not solving a survival problem. He was solving an aesthetic problem for someone too rich to be bored normally. He was there to make the landscape feel deeper, older, more meaningful, and more connected to nature. But the nature was designed, the cave was artificial, and the human being inside it was part of the decor. A living prop, a breathing statue. A man turned into atmosphere because apparently scenery needed a human subscription plan. That is why the garden hermit might be the most ridiculous job here. Not the most dangerous, not the grossest. Sin eaters and pea doctors are still fighting for that crown in a deeply unpleasant tournament. The garden hermit is ridiculous because it shows society becoming wealthy enough to turn loneliness into decoration. Eventually, the trend faded. By the 1830s, ornamental hermits were going out of fashion. They were replaced by other garden spectacles, living statues, and the endless desire to make outdoors theatrical. And no, garden gnomes were not directly inspired by garden hermits. But spiritually, come on, the vibe is suspicious. So there we have it. Messengers, sin eaters, powder monkeys, uroscopists, and garden hermits. Jobs that sound fake, jobs that feel illegal, jobs that make your worst Monday meeting look like a spa retreat. Most of them disappeared. The telegraph, telephone, and internet made human courier networks less essential. Changing beliefs pushed sin eating into memory. Labor laws and technology helped remove children from canon supply chains. Modern labs turned urine inspection into actual science. And rich people eventually found new ways to be unbearable. But here is the part that sticks. The jobs disappeared, but the logic did not. We still turn speed into labor. We still ask certain people to absorb the mess nobody else wants to touch. We still dress desperation up as opportunity, then act surprised when the opportunity smells like smoke and exploitation. We still turn poverty into performance when it makes the wealthy feel deeper, sadder, older, or more interesting. We just give those jobs cleaner uniforms, better titles, and more professional lighting. Progress, apparently. That is the hidden truth behind these ridiculous jobs. They are funny because they are old. They are uncomfortable because they are familiar. The costumes changed. The logic learned how to wear a badge. At the beginning, the sin eater sounded like the strangest possible job. Bread, corpse, guilt, and social exile. But after all this, maybe that was the whole theme hiding in plain sight. History kept finding people to carry what society did not want to carry itself. Messages, sins, gunpowder, disease, loneliness, status, fear. Basically, civilization's worst luggage. So yes, history had ridiculous jobs. But the ridiculous part was never just the job. It was the world that needed someone to do it, then looked away when the burden got ugly. And somehow, that makes the old jobs feel less like extinct curiosities and more like uncomfortable mirrors. So the next time your job feels absurd, remember, at least nobody paid you to eat funeral bread. Probably. And if they did, please update your resume immediately. Maybe also leave town. History was weird, but mostly, history was people carrying impossible things because nobody had built a better system yet.